me to the group. Good afternoon, everybody. Today we will be discussing on Pentaho data integration analytical query step with few examples. Before I move on to the topic, let me just specify my system configuration. I'm on Ubuntu 12.04 and I'm using Pentaho data integration 4.3 version. Okay. Before I move on to my examples, let me just show you, or let me just brief you on this analytical query step. So what I'm doing here is file, I'm just creating a new transformation, file, new transformation, and I can just, under the design, I can just search for the analytical query step. So this is the analytical query step. So this is how it looks. Let me just brief you on what this analytical query step does. The analytical query step allows us to pick forward or backward across rows. So we can fetch the rows either forward or we can fetch the rows backward rows and then populate into a different column. The basic use of this would be, or the common example where we could use this is to get the previous month sales or previous year sales, where we have the current month as well as the previous month to compare, which is pretty easy using this analytical query step. There are a few things that we should be careful while we use the analytical query step. Always pass the sorted input to this analytical query step, and this analytical step depends on the group by parameters. So it depends on the field or on the column that you group on. So you always need to specify what the group by field is, and you always need to pass a sorted input to this step. So let's just see what parameters or what we need to define when we use this step. The step name always defines a unique name within a transformation. So it could be a more descriptive name on what this analytical query is actually doing. And then the group by fields are the fields that you want to group on. So you could either click on get fields to get all the columns that you want to group, or you can just select from this pop-up and just select the one that you want to group. And the most important part is the analytical function, where actually the function really executes. The new field name is the name of the field that you want your new column to have. So you specify any of the name that is appropriate for the function that we are doing. Subject is a column that we would be doing analytical function on. Say for example, I'm doing an analytical function on my sales. So my sales measure would be the subject, and I want to call that as previous sales or previous month sales or previous year sales. That would be my new field name. And the type, the analytical function, the Pentaho data integration analytical function basically gives us two options. One is lead, the other is lag. Lead will allow us to look for the forward, and lag would specify which would help us to find the backward rows. So in this function, if you see, it says lead n rows forward and get subject. This n is what we specify how many rows you want to lead or how many rows you want to lag. It could be 1, it could be 0, it could be 2, or any numeric number. So that's what this analytical function allows us to do. Now let's move on to my first example. Okay, the business case for this example is, what I'm basically doing is, I have the customer information where I have his opening and closing balance. I just want to know what the customer's opening and closing previous month's balance was. Let me just walk you through on how I achieved this. So this is I'm just passing a simple spreadsheet which has the information or the required columns that I need for this business case. Let me just preview on this to show you what columns I'm using. So basically all that I have is the date column, the customer ID, customer name, and closing balance and opening balance. So I have the date column. I just want to fetch month and year, and I don't want the whole date, because I want to know the business case is to populate previous and current month closing and opening balance for a particular customer. So this is what my input looks like. And then what I'm doing is, as I mentioned previously, that I would like to get the month and year from my date. Because I didn't have a date, so what I'm doing is I'm just converting that date to a string. I'm using this select value step that allows me to convert to any data type. I now want to convert my date to a string, so I'm just selecting the field that I want to convert and what type I want it to be converted. I want it to be a string, so I'm just selecting a string. And what I'm doing here is, in my string cut, I want to cut the year part and the month part from my date. So what I specify the input stream field, that's date, and I want to name the output as year because I'm fetching the year part from my date. So I specify from where to where I want to cut, and then same thing I do for my month. Let's just review on this step and see how that happens. So now if I preview on this step, so this is my date and this is what the year and month column fetches. So that was the whole idea in converting date to a string and then getting year and month using a string cut operation. And then, as I previously mentioned, that the analytical query step works properly only if we pass a sorted input. So what I'm doing is I'm sorting, and I'm just before we use a sort function, we would know on what we would like to sort or what we would like to group on. So I would like to group on customer ID, year, and month. So I sort them, and the sort that I'm using is ascending. So I've just highlighted it as S. If I say no, it would be descending. I can select no or S. S would indicate it as ascending. So that's what I've done in sort, and then now comes the analytical query where actual calculation is done. So what I'm doing here is I have the customer ID, as I mentioned that I would like to group on this column and year. If you see that the order of my group by in the analytical query and the order of my sort should always be same. Say for example customer ID and year. The order in which I've used in sort should always be same, the order in which I pass to my analytical query. So I've used customer ID and year. Sorry. So now these two are my group by parameters, and then I want to calculate the previous month closing balance. So this is my new field name, and the subject that I'm using is closing balance. That's the column that I'm using, and what I'm doing is I'm lagging, lag n rows backwards because I want to get the previous one. So and my n is 1 because I just want previous month, not older than that. So the second one, what I'm doing is I'm doing same thing, but I'm doing on opening balance column. So I'm just specifying that column. And then what I'm doing in this step is I'm selecting all the required columns that I need. I'm just getting rid of the columns that I don't need. So these are the columns that I need. So I'm just selecting them. That's just for me to get rid of the extra columns which I don't need. And then I'm pushing that to a Excel output. Let's run this transformation and see what we get. So it was all good. Now let me open the file. So it was called example1 output. So when I open this file, this is how it looks. So all I have is year, month, customer ID, customer name, closing balance, and opening balance. All these columns, I just got that from my input. I didn't really do much on this, just that I've converted date to month, year and month. So what is most interesting is how we got the previous month and the previous month closing balance and previous month opening balance. So if you look at this output, the closing balance was 0 for the 2011-01. So the previous month for this column became 0. So it just lagged 1. So that's what has happened throughout for all my 12 months. And what has happened after the year change? So I am grouping it on year. So what has happened after the year has changed from 2011 to 2012? It treats this group as a different group. So the first one, because they've grouped on year and customers, the grouping parameter was on customer ID as well as on the year column. That's why it treats these two as an individual group. And then after I change my year to 2012, it treats as a different group. That's why it doesn't fetch 600 here in this column as the previous closing balance. So that's what is happening. Let me change my group by parameters and see what happens to our output. So what I'm doing now here is, previously I had year and customer ID. Let me just get rid of this year and see what the analytical query fetches us. So now I'm just grouping on customer ID. It should fetch me all the, so it should, at the end of the year, so for example 2011 December, whatever the closing balance was should be the 2012 previous closing balance now, because I'm not grouping on the year, but I'm just grouping on the customer ID. So I'm just trying to do that. So I'm just passing that to this output, which is called output without any year or month in the group by. Let's just run this, take this transformation and just run this. Okay. So let me just open that to see how different it is. So this was our first output, and this is my second output without any month or year group by. Okay, sorry. Let me just slice them so that we can see both. Pretty hard to show. Okay, let me just show you first one. So we have already looked at this first example. So what we found was that at 2012 we didn't have anything for the previous month. Whereas in the other output we would have data for, we don't have any data here, but we have 600 here because we haven't grouped on months, we've just grouped on year. So that's the whole idea. It depends on what your group by parameter is. Okay, so now let's move on to another example. Example 2, what I'm basically doing here is I'm just fetching few columns from a text file input. I'm just sorting them on a particular column called faculty. I'm generating a sequence which just generates sequence of numbers like 1, 2, 3. I specify what my sequence is, and then in the analytical query what I'm doing is I'm just leading and lagging using different n as a parameter. I just don't specify 1 because in my previous example we just saw how the data behaves when we lag 1 or lead 1. So in this example what I've done is I've just used different n parameters like 2, 4, 0. So just to see how the data behaves when we have different n. I mean how it leads 4, how it leads when we use 0 as n. So let's just preview on this step to see what's there in my faculty column. So what's in my faculty is, it just specifies it's null at times and then it has value 0, 1, 2, 3 and so on. So I'm just sorting on the same column, always pass sorted input to the analytical query step. So that's what I'm doing here. And what I'm doing is I'm just creating a sequence, just adding a sequence. So in the sequence what I've done here is I specify what my start value is 1 and increment is also 1. So it generates 1, 2, 3, 4 and the maximum value is just a default value. And then in my analytical query I'm grouping on the faculty and I'm generating 2 columns. One is load pronoun and lag pronoun, and then I'm using the sequence where I'm leading and lagging. So I'm just renaming the columns appropriately just to distinguish where I have 0 as n parameter where I have 4. So just to distinguish those differences, I'm just specifying the names differently. And then this is just a dummy step, do nothing. And then what I'm doing here is I'm just renaming the columns more appropriately and getting rid of the columns that I don't need and rearranging them so that it's more readable in the output. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm just arranging sequence so that we can compare what the lead sequence 2 was and what lag sequence 2. And then I'm just placing all in a order so that our output is more clear. So let's try to save this and run this transformation and see what it fetches us. Okay, all good. So now let me just open this. It's called example2 output. So if I open this, let me make it a bit wider. Okay, so this was the faculty. So all faculty 0 are under one group. So if you see here, all these are under one group because they've just grouped it on faculty, and 1 becomes a different group, and 2 becomes a different group, and so on. So what the sequence, how many ever had faculty as null, the sequence were generated. So there were 9 records where faculty was 0. So what lead sequence 2 would do is it would lead 2 columns. So leading 2 should fetch us 3. So that's what is happening. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It didn't fetch us it didn't fetch us further because there is nothing with faculty 0 where it can lead further 2. So that's why we have null. What's happening with lag is it goes back 2. So we have first 2 as empty because there were nothing before 1. So we got 2 nulls and then followed by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So for example, if I use lead 4, so it will skip the first 3. So it's leading to 4, so that's why it's fetching 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Now what I've done is I've done lag 0. 0 instance I'm not leading or lagging. I'm just using a function, but I'm not specifying n as 0, which doesn't really mean anything. Just to test what happens if we use 0. So it's just generating the same sequence that I had because I'm not leading. I'm leading n as 0, so that's why it's not doing anything. Same thing is happening for lag as well if you look at the output. Now let's see what happened with the row number. This was the row number that we got from the text input, and what I did was I just used lead 2 row number. So what it is doing is it's fetching after 2, so 166 it starts at. And lag 2, similar thing, it skips the first 2. Sorry, there's nothing before 131, that's why it fetches the 0 and then populates the rest of the values. So this is what my example 2. There's one last example, example 3, which is more similar to what's in example 1 and 2, but using analytical function, using more of those lead and lag functions to just see how the data changes. So what I'm doing here is I'm just generating 2 set of numbers. One is a sequence number, which I call as a group sequence. Why I need this column is I want to use this as my group by parameter. So I'm just generating a sequence, which I call the name of that column as group sequence, and I generate this. I'm just generating 4 rows, and in the other input what I'm doing is I'm generating a column called base row, 100 rows. What I'm doing here is I'm just using a generate random value step to generate random integer numbers. And then what I'm doing is I'm just using a partition product just to club these two. So if I preview on this, I'll get both the columns, group sequence and base row. So this is my group sequence and this is my random number. Base row and row are the columns that we generated from generate rows. Because we didn't specify any value, that's why it's null. In the other one as well, we just specified the column name, but we didn't specify a value. That's why it's null. So that's what has happened with the join step. So now what I do is, before I pass on any value to the analytical query, I need to sort them. What I'm doing here is I've previously, as I mentioned, that I want to sort on my group sequence. That's why, sorry, I want to group on my group sequence. That's why I sort on this column. So what I'm doing next in my analytical query step is just I'm using group sequence for my grouping, and what I'm using as a subject is the random one, the random number that I generated. I want to use that column to lead and lag. So first one is lead, second one is for lag, so I've named them appropriately. And what I'm leading and lagging is the n parameter is just 1. I'm just leading by 1 and lagging by 1. And the same thing what I'm doing here in select value step is I'm just getting rid of the columns that I don't need. All that I need is the random number, group sequence, lead and lag. I don't need the base row and the other column row because it doesn't have any value. So I'm just copying that to an Excel output. Let me just run this. Good. Let me just show you the output. Okay. So what I've done here is this is my sequence. So I group based on the group sequence. So first 100 has sequence as 1, whereas the second and then next 100 2 and then 3 and then 4 because I generated just 4 group sequences. And then the random numbers were 100. So because we used the Cartesian product, it just multiplied these two. So it's m into n rows. So m, whereas m had 4 and the n had 1, so that's why it generated so many rows, 400 rows. And then what I'm doing is lead 1. So my second value becomes first. That's what's happening with the lead. And what's happening with lag is my first value becomes second. So that's what has happened with this output. That's all I had for today. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Haley. Good afternoon, everyone. Today I'm going to talk about SQL Ledger and how to integrate it with Pentaho. So, to start with, let me introduce SQL Ledger. SQL Ledger is an enterprise resource planning application which is open source. I'm going to use it today to simulate a company that we sell model cars or model cars and motorcycles. This company is called Steel Wheels. And for people who have worked with Pentaho before, they may be familiar with Steel Wheels. So let me just logging in and let me show you a little bit about SQL Ledger. So here in SQL Ledger, it's a very basic ERP system. We have a comprehensive set of options on our left screen, and the idea of this exercise today is to use Pentaho to keep SQL Ledger and another operational data source synchronized. The second part of this exercise today will be to use the general ledger functionality in SQL Ledger to generate an accounting dimensional model, and then we're going to use that dimensional model in Pentaho, in the Pentaho user console. So let's get started with a basic introduction to SQL Ledger. So as I said before, we're going to work in a company that is called Steel Wheels. Steel Wheels has a warehouse which is located in Shenzhen, China. Just here, and from these warehouses we're gonna ship all around, all over the world. So this is in one now. One of the first challenges we have with SQL Ledger, and one of the first requirements is to keep our customers and products synchronized with our operational data source. This is a very common requirement when we work in e-commerce. We either may use our e-commerce platform as the source of truth, or SQL Ledger as the source of truth. So we're going to use in this moment another data source, which is going to be steel wheels as our source of truth, and from there we're going to just populate the data here in SQL Ledger. So here we're going to see our customers here. So we click here, we see all our customers. These customers are coming from our steel wheels database, the one that is shipped with Pentagon. So this is all our customers. Each customer has its own city, its own country of origin, and the person who is related to it. One of the caveats is that the steel wheels database is not supposed to be an operational data source. It's supposed to be a data map. I am using it as source because I just want to do a little bit of reverse engineering. And because of that, we're gonna see like some of these empty fields that may not be populated, which is all right for this exercise. So we have our customers here, and another important point, they may be treated as parts or assemblies, depending on the product. So if we see a part is pretty much any good that we purchase in order to be resell later. And an assembly is something that is a product that is manufactured, that requires the other parts in order to be created. So in this case, we're going to simulate that we are going to resell parts. We're going to resell these toys, these motor cars. So if I come here to reports, I continue, I can see all the products, all the different motor toys that we're going to resell. This table, as I said before, is coming from the steel wheels data source. Now the question is, the first part of the exercise, I'm going to say, okay, I imported all of these from steel wheels. How did I do it? So the tool I used for this was, let me just show you here. Use a spoon, this one. So it's a very simple ETL. This is for customers. Something to highlight in the ETL is the return the auto-generated key field. So we have this target table, which is customer. This customer will of this part of the customer information. Yeah, this customer is going to return me this temporary primary key, this auto-generated key, and based on using this auto-generated key, I'm going to populate this transaction ID here in the address and the contact table. It's very simple. I use a very simple well to populate, which is truncate and populate. Of course, we can do it. We can use insert update. That would be or another type of change data capture strategy. But in order to keep this as simple as possible, I'm gonna just use this. We can improve this later on. Same before copy products. So we just get all the products from the steel wheel source, and then we just put it here in the database. This is our products. So here is how we keep our customers and products synchronized. Very simple. When we go here and we just go, for example, to product, let's go here to products, to parts, we'll see our products. All right. Now, something important with SQL Ledger is like it let us set up our chart of accounts. So we have here our chart of accounts. So at the moment, I have already set up this to have our steel wheels inventory and our here we have our COGS was here, yeah, from our resold products. I'm going to show an example of how this works. So at the moment we just go here to reports, and we have 0. Yeah. So we're going to start playing with this. Just go here to ins. We're going to add a new transaction. So this is going to be an open transaction since steel wheels. The first transaction was in January 2003. I'm going to just change this transaction to 1st of January 2003. And I'm going to use this as opening balance. And this is going to be the opening balance for steel wheels. So it's going to be here the opening account balance. So this account here is from the assets. It's an assets type account. This one is an equity type account. So I'm going to use here as the opening balance $1 million. Yeah, and here in equity 1 million. 3, yes. Okay. So at the moment, if we go here to report the chart of accounts, we will start seeing how our assets and our equity seems to move. Yeah. And the next step here is, okay, we have this ready, and I'm gonna order. Okay, we have already some stock. I'm going to create an order, a sales order. So if I go here to order entry and go here to sales order, I'm gonna use here a transaction. So I prepare this sales order. This sales order is coming from the Pentaho sample data, and this is the sales order number 10100, and it has these products. So let me just put this here in a way that I can load this too. So the customer is this one. I diecast. Let's put it here. The future date. It's gonna automatically identify me. It's gonna say that this customer has a credit limit of $1,400. So right, the order date is important. Order date is on 6th of January 2003. So here 6 of January 2003. Okay, so I'm gonna skip this transaction, and this is required by 13th of January 2003. I'm not gonna specify any type of shipping at the moment, and the three elements that we're gonna include here are these: the product code S183969, updated, okay. Didn't find it. Let me use the name. 14. Let me set this one. Let me find the part. Let me see if this part exists. Probably mine. Let's see here. Apparently it does exist. Let me just see here. That number, this one. All right. Apparently didn't. 3969 S18. Okay, let's use this one. Doesn't have to be a problem. Let's move this one here. So here, yeah, you can update. Nice. Oh, it has a space. Okay, good. Let me see if the next one exists here. Gonna insert it here. Update. Good. And okay, the first one, the quantity is 50, and the second one, the quantity is 30. Okay, let's just keep that as it is because we are running a little bit out of time. So we create the order. Yeah. So if we come back here to record and sales order, we're gonna say that our order is there. However, this order for $6,000 doesn't appear still in our chart of accounts. Yeah. Why? Because it just has go through the order process. Now we need to make this. We need to convert this order and ship it, and then invoice the customer for this. So let's assume we're gonna get to this order, and we're gonna say we already shipped this. The moment we update this, we say we ship 50 of these Porsche model cars and one of these four toy cars, and we save it. In this moment, this order appears to be as shipped. After doing this, something that before doing that, we should have a create a sales invoice. Yeah. So this customer has an account with us, has a credit limit of $1,400. This transaction just $6,100, so it's perfect. So I'm gonna record this here in debtors, which now is going to be recorded in our chart of accounts. So this is the moment where our order becomes or appears in our chart of accounts. So if we come here to our account receivables, and we see the reports and we see the transactions, we're going to see this invoice here. We go to the chart of accounts, we're going to see this. Beautiful. Now, until here everything is alright with SQL Ledger. Next step is I want to have this chart of accounts from steel wheels, and I want to visualize it in pentagon. So for doing this, I have created this dimensional model, which is made up of an account, has a chart of accounts, it has a date, it has a category, it's an account type, and a transaction type. It's very simple. We could add a balance, and you see that last not empty. We can add a other type of information here, but just for the sake of this exercise, we're going to just leave it as it is. Now, I already published this. Before doing that, and this is another interesting part of this exercise, is how did I populate from SQL Ledger to this dimensional model. So I use this transformation here. So this transformation gets the data from use SQL Ledger as data source, and we're going to populate our dimensional model. So we get the data from this, which is the chart of accounts. We get the data from our transactions, and we just push them in our model. Now, let's play with this. If we go here to Pentagon, and let me just refresh. Okay, I'm going to create a new analyzer report. So we have our accounting data warehouse. Okay, so we have 1 million of opening capital, opening balance, and we have one transaction for $6,000, which is in our accounts receivable. It hasn't been paid yet. So we want to see that here. So here we have our different accounts. So we have our account types: assets, equities, liabilities. So equity and expenses. So this is not equity. And now we're going to use this transaction type and the amount. Excellent. So this is what we got from our data source. Something is, this is all data. I'm going to rewrite this one. Okay, good. Let me clean out the cache. Reopen it. We have our category, description. We have our transaction type and our account. Excellent. It should be balanced. There's something here that doesn't look good. Just something that doesn't look good. So if I come here, let's see columns. These two. This one has one extra one. All right. Okay, there is something that has to be reviewed here in in this transformation. The idea was to have this. We can see this, and we can filter using our data. So we want to see how is it going for 2003. Don't tell me I don't have 2003. So this one is showing you pretty much, because at the end this is double entry accounting. We should have a balance in these two, but yeah, there should be something there. All right, that's it for today.